James already asked Toronto or it's over. It's over. Already over. It's over.
The Subcommittee on Civil Rights and Human Services will come to order. Welcome, everyone. I note that a quorum is present. Before we begin, I want to note that several of us have shadows today with the Foster Youth Program. I have with me today Phoenix Ramirez from Southern Oregon University in Ashland, Oregon, and I want to ask the members who do have foster youth shadowing them today to please introduce your foster youth, and we won't take it out of your time. I ask unanimous consent that Representative Wild of Pennsylvania and Representative Sablon of the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands and Mr. Grothman of Wisconsin be permitted to participate in today's hearing with the understanding that their questions will come only after all members of the Subcommittee on Civil Rights and Human Services on both sides of the aisle who are present have had an opportunity to question the witness. Without objection, so ordered. The subcommittee is meeting today in a budget and oversight hearing to hear testimony on examining the policies and priorities of the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Food and Nutrition Service. Pursuant to Committee Rule 7C, opening statements are limited to the chair and ranking member. This allows us to hear from our witnesses sooner and provides all members with adequate time to ask questions. I recognize myself now for the purpose of making an opening statement. Mr. Lips, thank you for appearing before the committee today on behalf of the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Food and Nutrition Service, or FNS. Welcome back to the Capitol. Before I begin, I want to recognize and thank the department for working with staff during the government shutdown earlier this year. Members were justifiably concerned with the effects of the shutdown on families across the country, and we appreciate your efforts to minimize the disruption. According to its mission statement, the main objective of FNS is to end hunger and obesity and strengthen access to healthy food through nutrition assistance programs. Today's hearing is an opportunity to assess the commitment of FNS to that mission. Congress has long recognized the federal government's important role in addressing food insecurity, which affects roughly 15 million U.S. households, including a staggering 1 in 5 children in my home state of Oregon. Over the course of more than 70 years, federal child nutrition programs have proven to be an effective approach to providing children with the healthy food they need to succeed. Research shows that expanding access to nutritious food through child nutrition programs not only improves children's educational growth and outcomes, but also improves their health through adulthood. Because of these benefits, Congress has historically supported and strengthened child nutrition programs on a bipartisan basis. In fact, today, child nutrition programs operated by FNS serve more than 30 million children throughout the year in nearly every corner of the country. In Oregon, nearly 300,000 students participated in the National School Lunch Program, and nearly 150,000 students participated in the School Breakfast Program last year. We should all be uniting in support of these valuable evidence-based programs. Yet under this administration, FNS has repeatedly rolled back nutrition standards, which are an important part of addressing childhood obesity and diabetes, and undermined programs that help struggling families put food on the table. The administration's annual budget proposal for the USDA outlines a set of priorities that reflect this disturbing diversion from the mission of FNS. For example, the proposed budget sought to make it harder for schools in low-income areas to provide free meals to all students by excluding 3,000 schools from the widely popular community eligibility provision. As a result, up to 1.3 million children could be left without school meals, and those schools will have to spend more time with administrative paperwork. Additionally, through rulemaking and other actions, the administration is actively taking steps to undermine food security. For example, USDA recently moved to prevent children who rely on non-custodial adults, including children whose families are struggling with the opioid epidemic, from accessing free school meals through their family's participation in Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP. Worse still, the administration is exploring ways to redefine poverty itself by upending how the federal poverty line is adjusted for inflation. If successful, thousands of children whose families still struggle to make ends meet would be cut off from vital nutrition assistance. All of these actions together reveal a Department of Agriculture that is not adhering to its commitment to provide basic nutrition assistance for the children and families who need it most. Each member here knows that providing children with healthy and nutritious food is vital to fostering the success of our nation's future. When children are hungry, they can't learn. Restricting access to nutrition assistance programs will prevent children from reaching their full potential, and ultimately it will cost more in the long run. We can and must do better. Mr. Lips, thank you again for being here. I look forward to the opportunity to discuss these important issues under the purview of the Food and Nutrition Service, and I do hope that we can all work together on behalf of our nation's children and families. And now I will yield to the ranking member for the purpose of an opening statement. I recognize the distinguished ranking member, Mr. Comer, for the purpose of making an opening statement.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for yielding, and we are here today to help understand the USDA and child nutrition programs that it helps support. Severe and critical role in ensuring that America's youth have access to nutritious and healthy food. I believe wholeheartedly that no kid should go hungry. The well-being of every American child is important, and proper nutrition is part of helping children succeed in life. Students cannot learn if they are hungry. The school meal program provides valuable assistance to schools to help meet the needs of their students through the breakfast, lunch, and snack programs. USDA must do all it can to make the administration of these school meal programs as easy as possible while continuously improving program efficiency and integrity. Systems run best when they're operated from the ground up, so less paperwork and administrative burden would aid in refocusing these programs back to their original intent, serving our students. Another important program FNS oversees is the Summer Food Service Program. As we know, this program helps provide meals to kids in need during the summer months, and I look forward to working with the administration to help reach more children, especially in rural communities like the one I represent. WIC is another program that I hope we discuss with our witness today. This program helps provide young children access to better nutrition. There are many positive aspects of this program, and we must ensure benefits are reaching their intended recipients by making any needed reforms to prevent waste and abuse. I'm hopeful the switch to electronic benefits will help, and I again look forward to working with the USDA to see how we can best help states to support some of our most vulnerable constituents. In general, rather than focusing on increased federal dollars or regulations that limit local providers' ability to provide nutritious meals, USDA should work with their local partners to help kids with the greatest need get nutritious meals. As someone who has worked on these programs as Commissioner of Agriculture in Kentucky, I can attest to the importance of the national government providing these programs the freedom, resources, and accountability they need to find and tackle childhood hunger. The people sharing neighborhoods and towns with hungry youth are more capable of addressing the needs they face than legislators in Washington. Recognizing this fact is the best way to address the individual needs of children and promises the greatest results in getting food into the stomachs of America's hungriest children. I look forward to learning more about the department's efforts to address these pressing needs, and I'm eager to work with my colleagues to defeat childhood hunger. With that, I yield back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Comer, and I will now introduce our witness. Brandon Lips is Administrator of USDA's Food and Nutrition Service, where he leads the agency in administering the nation's federal nutrition assistance programs, including the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, school meals, the Child and Adult Care Feeding Program, the Special Supplemental Nutrition Program for Women, Infants, and Children, or WIC. He is also currently serving as Acting Deputy Undersecretary for Food, Nutrition, and Consumer Services, reporting to Agriculture Secretary Sonny Perdue. We appreciate our witness for being here today and look forward to your testimony. Let me remind the witness that we have read your written statement and it will appear in full in the hearing record. Pursuant to Committee Rule 7D and committee practice, you are asked to limit your oral presentation to a 5-minute summary of your written statement. Let me remind the witness that pursuant to Title 18 of the U.S. Code, Section 1001, it is illegal to knowingly and willfully falsify any statement, representation, writing, document, or material fact presented to Congress or otherwise conceal or cover up material fact. Before you begin your testimony, please remember to press the button on the microphone in front of you so you will turn it on and members can hear you. And as you speak, the light in front of you will turn green. After 4 minutes, the light will turn yellow to signal that you have 1 minute remaining. When the light turns red, your 5 minutes have expired. We will let the witness make his presentation before we move to member questions. When answering a question, please remember once again to turn your microphone on. I now recognize Mr. Lips for your testimony.
Thank you, Chairwoman Bonamici, Ranking Member Comer, and distinguished members of the committee for the opportunity to testify before you today. As the Chairwoman said, I am Brandon Lips. I'm the Acting Deputy Undersecretary for the Food, Nutrition, and Consumer Services Mission Area at USDA and the Administrator of the Food Nutrition Service. Before I get into my testimony, let me congratulate the young men and women that are here shadowing some of you today and extend an open invitation. We love to encourage public service in the mission of FNS, and if any of you would like to join us out there, we would be happy to work with you on giving you an opportunity to come see what the important work that we do at the Food and Nutrition Service every day. The FNS budget, which is nearly $100 billion a year across 15 programs, is roughly 2/3 of USDA's entire budget. This committee is keenly aware of the critical importance of these programs, which include school meals, the Child and Adult Care Food Program, which we commonly refer to as CACFP, the Summer Food Service Program, and the WIC program. We know that families across the nation rely on these programs every day. On an average school day, almost 30 million children receive a school lunch, and almost 15 million children receive a school breakfast. Over 4.5 million receive meals and snacks in child care settings through CACFP. Last summer, almost 146 million meals were served to almost 3 million children through the Summer Food Service Program. And WIC served a monthly average of 6.9 million women, infants, and children in FY 2018. These programs ensure access to nutritious food so that children can grow, develop, and learn, and are central to Secretary Perdue's pledge to do right and feed everyone. FNS is working to implement the Secretary's pledge by continuing our long-standing commitment to ensuring all federal nutrition assistance programs serve eligible populations effectively and make optimal use of federal resources. We look to accomplish this by focusing on 3 principles: to improve customer service for our partners and participants, to protect and enhance integrity, and to ensure that FNS programs are helping participants move towards self-sufficiency and independence. We all know that if infants don't start off with adequate nutrition, they have a difficult time moving into a school environment where they can learn. If they don't have full stomachs while they're in school, they again have a difficult time learning, and we want them to develop into productive adults in society. Secretary Perdue has placed a robust focus on customer service across USDA. Given the number and diversity of FNS customers, those who participate and those who partner with us on our programs are at the center of that effort. Great customer service starts with listening to and engaging with our customers. We heard first and foremost from our customers that school nutrition professionals want students back in the cafeteria as lunch participation has continued to decline since the standards were implemented in 2012, particularly in the paid meal and reduced price categories. To create school meals that were both nutritious and appealing to the students being served, schools needed targeted adjustments to existing meal standards. That's why one of Secretary Perdue's first actions was to extend school meal flexibilities related to milk, whole grains, and sodium. Keeping with the goals of the underlying statute, USDA made these flexibilities permanent and provided the certainty that schools needed as they continue to implement the nutrition standards. We also heard that education and training standards for nutrition professionals that USDA implemented under the last reauthorization put strain on small and rural school districts. Knowing this, we revised those rules to allow these districts more flexibility in the hiring of the individuals who run their school nutrition programs. Let me turn to the President's budget request for fiscal year 2020, which fully funds the child nutrition programs, including school meals, the Child and Adult Care Food Program, the Summer Food Service Program, and the Special Milk Program, so that every child has access to nutritious meals in schools, child care centers, daycare homes, and other facilities throughout the school year and when school is not in session. The request also fully funds WIC to ensure that all women, infants, and children who are eligible and wish to participate may do so. As you may be aware, birth rates are declining, particularly among women under the age of 30. This has contributed in declines in the WIC population for a number of years. But we estimate that participation will average about 6.6 million women, infants, and children for fiscal year 2020, about the same number as participated last year. The President's budget request also makes targeted proposals to improve program integrity and customer service in the school meals programs. Let me highlight a few. We propose stronger income eligibility verification to focus on those applications that are more prone for risk for error. Our research-based approach supports operators and strategies to achieve greater accuracy in serving school meals to eligible children. We heard from states that they wanted to ensure the integrity of their program was strong, so the budget requests a $20 million increase for a total of $25 million and grants to states to modernize systems and improve program operations, oversight, and overall program integrity. General state administrative grants are capped, and with competing demands for staff and activities related to administrative reviews, states are often not able to prioritize technology upgrades. In regards to reauthorization, I know you have a large and important task ahead of you. Because of their scope and significance to families and communities across America, Congress has a long history of constructive bipartisan action to strengthen them. I'm pleased to join you in that spirit today when we work together to move these programs forward. Let me close by saying that I know the painstaking effort required to develop legislation of this size and complexity, and we at the Food and Nutrition Service stand ready to provide any support and technical assistance that you may need as you deliberate these important matters. I am happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you for your testimony. Before we begin questions, I want to remind members who wish to insert a written statement into the record, they may do so by submitting them to the committee clerk electronically in Microsoft Word format by 5 p.m. on June 18th, 2019. Under Committee Rule 8A, we will now question the witnesses under the 5-minute rule. As chair, I will go first. We will then alternate between the parties, and I now recognize myself for 5 minutes. Mr. Lips, as I mentioned in my opening statement, I'm concerned about the department's fiscal year 2020 budget proposal concerning a change to the community eligibility provision that would prevent schools from using an area average to determine their identified student percentage, or ISP. This is important to the schools in the district I represent. In fact, I just had lunch with some students last week and spoke with the people administering the program. This is an important issue for them. If enacted, each individual school would need to meet the 40% ISP threshold, resulting in thousands of schools losing the ability to use CEP and more than 1 million children losing access to free meals through this provision. What is the department's rationale for requesting this policy change?
Chairwoman, first let me be clear that no students who are eligible for paid or free would lose eligibility under that provision. They would have to enter through a different application process, but they would not lose eligibility. The President's budget put forward a proposal that offers an opportunity for the savings from that plan to be invested in other areas. We know there's a lot of competing priorities in child nutrition as you consider those. And so we put that forward for consideration, ensuring that all of those on paid and free are still eligible. Schools that are above that 40% threshold can continue to operate. It's just not on district level.
I understand. However, when I speak with schools at home, this program reduces stigma and the paperwork burden for schools. And districts tell us that it's working well. It seems that that's in line with the customer service priority you recognized. I think we should give the districts options to streamline enrollment in school meal programs, and CEP is a key part of that. I wanted to move on to summer EBT. In 2012, the FNS published evaluations of summer EBT demonstrations, which were designed to test alternative methods of providing nutrition to low-income students during the summer. And in Oregon, the program showed a 5.2 reduction in very low food insecurity, which is the most severe form of food insecurity among children. Yet in reviewing applications for the round of summer EBT projects beginning this year, the department chose to discontinue funding for the program in Oregon. In fact, the department is only funding 4 state or tribal projects over the next 3 years, compared to 10 funded last summer. So your department found that the Oregon Summer EBT project reduced very low food insecurity among children. Do you agree with that finding that your department made?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
Well, it's interesting. If we all agree that the Oregon Summer EBT program reduced very low food insecurity, why did the department decide to end funding to Oregon, therefore putting those children once again at risk for food insecurity?
Chairwoman, that's an important question, and the Secretary and I agree with you on that very point. The money provided for these projects is demonstration money that was originally provided in Appropriations Act in 2010. The department has found in a number of areas that very low food insecurity in children has been reduced through the summer EBT programs. We think it's an important program that has worked well. We've obtained that data and reported it to Congress. Our interest is moving on to researching areas of new information as that demonstration money is given to us to report back to Congress on things that can work well while you continue to consider how to move forward in feeding children in the summer. We recognize that that's a difficult question. We want to work with you on that as we move forward. The process was competitive this year in applications that were submitted for what projects would be funded that can provide us new information on how to better serve children in the summer, and I think our interests are aligned on that front for sure.
Well, and I appreciate that, and I look forward to continuing the conversation. It feels unacceptable unacceptable for the department to have evidence from its own evaluations that a program reduces severe child hunger, and then nevertheless the program is cut. So I'd like to work with you and my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to address that. If there are other priorities that are considered ahead of that, I think we need to have that conversation. And just briefly back to community eligibility. We've had many conversations in this committee about community eligibility. And I understand you said that there are other ways for the students to access community, or the districts to access community eligibility. However, there are significant barriers to families in filling out applications. Some people are unaware of it. And I'm sure that there are children who are eligible who aren't filling out the paperwork. Also, the stigma that's attached, it disappears with community eligibility. And once again, when I speak with the districts and the school nutrition providers in Oregon, they are very, very supportive of expanding access to community eligibility, because it does streamline the paperwork and make it easier for the school, but also reduces that stigma. So I hope we can work together on that as well. I now recognize the Ranking Member, Mr. Comer from Kentucky, for 5 minutes for your questions.
Thank you for yielding. Mr. Undersecretary, it's great to have you here today. I know that school food personnel want to serve healthy, tasty meals to kids, and I've spoken with several school nutrition administrators all across the 1st Congressional District of Kentucky that tell me they have a challenging time wading through the regulations to try to come up with meals that kids like that meet the regulations on the federal level. So my first question, how are the new regulations on grains, sodium, and milk going to help my constituents serve meals to those kids?
Congressman Comer, the flexibility given on those 3 items are flexibilities that were requested directly from the school meals professionals that serve our kids every day. We heard that and traveled throughout the country. The Secretary did, I did. We certainly heard it in comments. I agree with you. School nutrition professionals don't want to serve kids meals that aren't nutritious. That is their goal when they show up at work every day. And they're looking those kids in the eyes and wanting them to help them make better health decisions throughout their life. And I think they're all committed to that. They requested some minimal flexibilities to the standard that would allow kids to eat those meals to reduce the waste and ensure that kids are getting the nutrition that they need, so that we're not sending kids home, some to an empty cupboard, who aren't eating their meals at school. And we believe those minimal flexibilities help accomplish that.
Great. My congressional district borders 4 states. And retailers who operate in more than one state often struggle with the excessive red tape and lack of uniformity amongst each state's WIC licensing process. In order to help streamline this process, can FNS direct states to start with the retailer's existing SNAP licenses and only ask for additional information beyond what a retailer has already provided on their SNAP license? And if not, is there anything Congress can do to make that happen?
That's a great question, Congressman. FNS retailers are authorized at the federal level by FNS. WIC retailers are authorized on the state level by the WIC state agencies. I believe that there are some statutory impediments to us changing how that process works, so I think offline we can engage with you on opportunities to move that forward. We certainly hear those challenges from retailers as well, and the important thing is that we have as many retailers as possible in the system so that the customers have access to that.
Absolutely, and we want to work with you on that because unfortunately in this environment, many of our rural communities are having less food retailers now, grocery retailers, and we're living in an environment where we have more food deserts. Not just in the urban areas, but in the rural areas as well. So anything we can do to help with that, to make that process easier, we want to do that on this committee. So we'll look forward to working with you on that. My next question: in the past, there have been issues with certain items that are part of a WIC prescription not being available during times of disaster due to production or logistical challenges. While some states are quick to provide substitutions, some may be slower to act, causing WIC participants to be unable to access items on their prescription. Does USDA have the authority it needs to provide states with flexibility to authorize item substitution at authorized merchants during times of disaster?
Congressman, I believe that we do. We'll take a deeper look at that. As you noted, we have given that flexibility to a number of states in the recent disasters that we've had just since I have been at the Food and Nutrition Service. It sounds like we may need to do some work with some of the states to ensure that their processes are in place to get that communication more quickly accomplished. We do our best to turn those around very quickly at FNS.
Great. Let me get one more question in here. When the idea of reauthorization of child nutrition laws comes up, I hear a lot about streamlining applications, especially for the summer. Can you tell me why streamlining is necessary and if there's anything the agency can do to help improve this effort and what must be legislated?
Yes, sir. We've taken a number of actions at FNS in recent years to start streamlining applications. There are a lot of programs that operate to feed kids throughout the year. We have 15 programs at FNS, and a lot of those are for summer. And we hear from operators on the ground very often about the difficulty from moving, for example, from a CAC FP at-risk operator to a summer food service program operator. And so the agency's taken actions to streamline some of those operations. I think there is some more that can be done that would require legislative action, and we would be happy to engage with you on those.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Undersecretary. Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you.
Thank you. I now recognize Representative Fudge from Ohio for 5 minutes for your questions.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Lips, for being here.
Yes, ma'am.
Madam Chair, I do have a shadow with me today who is a part of the National Foster Youth Institute's Shadow Day, Nadia Goforth. Thank you for being here today.
Welcome.
Mr. Lips, hunger is very, very real in the state of Ohio, as it is in the rest of this nation. Ohio has been ranked 9th worst for low food security from 2015 to 2017. You oversee the administration of SNAP, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
This also includes how you deal with ABODs, is that correct?
That's correct.
It's my understanding that there is a recent proposal for a rule that would limit access to SNAP benefits by ABODs, which may affect more than 700,000 persons. Now, let me just say, and I've said it before, it is absolutely dishonest and immoral for anyone to suggest that poor people do not want to work. I assure you, people want a hand up, they don't want a handout. And it is insulting to suggest otherwise. And so clearly I have a real problem with how we have handled this particular population. Now, you've given us a lot of data today, and I have asked repeatedly to your department to give me data on who ABODs are. We have no idea who they are because you don't collect the data. You have the authority to do it. Why do you not do it?
Congresswoman, the only data that FNS has is that's collected through the quality control process, which is data collected at enrollment and certification for those recipients. Congress has over time discouraged us from requiring recipients to report more information.
That's not my question, sir. You have the authority to do it. Why do you not?
Congress has discouraged us over time from collecting more information.
We have not said you cannot.
Over time, Congress has discouraged that. We don't collect that at the federal level. What we do know about ABODs is the definition of ABODs that Congress put in statute for that statutory requirement on them is that they are between the ages of 18 and 49. They don't have dependents in the household. They're
It doesn't tell us if they're veterans. It doesn't tell us if they're mentally ill. It doesn't tell us if they're homeless, if they're sick. And even your secretary, Secretary Perdue, indicated that ABOD definition needed some fine-tuning. Are you at least trying to fine-tune it?
I think the definition is clear, Congresswoman. I'd be happy to talk you through what we know about that.
I know what you know about it. So my position then, since you choose not to collect the data, is that you want to operate in the dark, purposely operate in the dark and punish people, and you don't even know who they are. I think it's really a shame that we would treat people who we don't even know, make them believe that we think that they are lazy, make them believe that we think that they are not worthy or deserving of the benefits that this government should be able to give them. Let me move on. We'll talk a little bit about categorical eligibility in SNAP. Now, you talked about flexibility, and I know that Republicans in particular are very, very big on states' rights and the flexibility of states. So why would you take away the flexibility of states as it relates to categorical eligibility?
Congresswoman, let me comment on your previous statement. It is the state's job to know these recipients, and they are in fact required.
Please answer my question.
to
I
get
have
to
a
know
limited time.
those recipients and to assess them, and the agency's done a lot of work to make that
But you
happen.
don't have the information, and you're making the decision. So could you just
The
answer
state
the
is
second
required
question?
to do those things. We have
You
regulations that
don't
require
have
it in a
the-
memo.
They
that
are not
requires it.
making the decision, sir. Could you just answer my question?
They're making a decision on who that requirement applies to, and I'd be happy to share with you the information on that.
Could you just answer my question?
Yes, ma'am. Remind me your question on categorical eligibility.
Why do you want to take away the flexibility from the states by the rule that you're proposing to change Cat-L?
Congresswoman, balancing how an individual enters a program and the integrity required with that and ensuring that the program benefits go to the right people is always a difficult call. And we want to make sure that the program has the utmost integrity on that front. Some people are currently being qualified for the SNAP program by receiving a brochure from another program. I don't think any of us think that that's the integrity that this program needs to have. And the rule that is in our regulatory agenda on broad-based categorical eligibility, we do believe will be intended to address that problem.
So in some instances, you trust the states, and in others, you don't.
It's our job to set guidelines to ensure that integrity is carried throughout the program and that recipients across the states are treated fairly.
But the fact is, you trust them in some things and you don't in others. You don't trust them in feeding hungry children. You don't trust them in feeding sick or elderly.
That's
a place
that's
you
not
don't
accurate,
trust them.
Congresswoman.
That's the choice you've just made.
It's our
Madam Chair, I
job to
yield
ensure
back.
that
Sir, my
integrity
time
is
is done. I
throughout the
yield back,
program.
Madam Chair.
Thank you.
I now recognize Representative Stefanik from New York for 5 minutes for your questions.
Thank you, Chairwoman, and thank you, Mr. Lips, for being here today. I represent New York's 21st District, a very rural part of the Northeast and, frankly, the East Coast. And in my district, as we've heard many other members and you testify, it's important to recognize that children are not just in need during the school year, but also during the summer months. And that's a vital component of child nutrition services. We know that the program has a participation rate of below 20%, and the number of meals served during the summer has been decreasing in recent years. What can we do to strengthen this program and help children gain access to food during the summer months? I'd specifically also like to hear your thoughts on rural regions, because there are transportation challenges in a district like mine that I've heard firsthand from families. You talked a bit about streamlining operations, but I'd love to hear more ideas about how we can strengthen the program during the summer months.
Sure. Thanks for that question, Congresswoman. I think everybody in this room agrees that that is a very important question and a difficult one that we need to work together to solve. FNS has been testing methods to feed children in the summer for a number of years. The authority was given in 2010 that I talked to one of your colleagues about earlier. We've learned a lot from that about how we can help children be fed in the summer through summer EBT. The summer food service program is great, but it's generally provided at congregate feeding sites. That's often an issue both in urban and rural areas, but certainly I understand from a rural area the transportation issues involved in that. So streamlining is part of that, but that doesn't get children to the meal site, that doesn't get food to the children. We've tested a number of methods that we do know work. We continue to test additional methods, and we would be happy to talk through all of those with you offline. Certainly, as you'll potentially consider child nutrition reauthorization, we think this is one of the most important questions.
What are some of those methods that you've found to be effective based upon the tests?
Sure. We've tested varying levels of benefits in the summer EBT program, which is where additional dollars are provided typically onto SNAP cards for families to have additional money to buy food in the summertime. We've shown at the $30 per month level that very low food insecurity in children has decreased, and that is the measure of the worst hunger for children in this country. So we think that that's a very important measurement. We've shown in some instances that children who were provided allocations of actual food has improved their eating habits in the summer because they're given nutritious food to eat. Certainly, anyone who shows up to a summer feeding site is having access to food in the summer. So all of those are working. How we expand that on a level that works for all the children across this country continues to be a difficult question, but one I think we can move forward in addressing together.
And on the rural piece in particular, again, this is not a one-size-fits-all. When you're dealing with differences in just rural versus suburban and urban communities in New York State. Again, my district, I have 194 towns and villages. It's very rural. I have the largest counties in the state. So the transportation piece is critical. What other innovative concepts have you tested specifically for providing support during the summer months in rural communities?
Most of the testing in rural communities has been through summer EBT. We are working on some new opportunities now that we can brief you on, but we don't have data on that at this time.
Okay, I would love to work with the department to identify what those innovative solutions are for rural communities. My district is a great example of a district that's in need and that is quite rural, so let's work together on that. With that, I yield back.
Thank you.
Thank you. I now recognize Representative Dr. Schreier from Washington for 5 minutes for your questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Lips, thank you for being here today. The Dr. Schreier, I'm a pediatrician, and so I do have this focus on children's nutrition and not just feeding, but really making sure that what they get gives them good nutrition. So I'm concerned about the rolling back of a lot of the targets. For example, the sodium reduction target. And I recognize, of course, that most children do not have high blood pressure, and this may not have an immediate impact, but over time, what we're doing really is establishing what their palates are. And so if we give kids a salty, like a salt tooth or a sweet tooth, that lasts forever and will affect their ultimate outcomes. So the sodium standard reductions, also the standards for whole grains and relaxing those standards, and also the equivalency of sugar-sweetened milk with other milk that I would argue is also not good for children's health in the long run. And so there are reporting standards as well, so that we know what schools are doing and who's complying. And it seems that we're not getting that information anymore. The 2010 Healthy Hunger-Free Kids Act provided an additional 6 cents per meal in reimbursement for schools that were meeting updated standards. And that's a good way for us to track how many schools are meeting it. In 2016, about 90% were. And I was wondering, is the USDA still collecting this data?
Dr. Schreier, we're not collecting that specific information. Let me tell you a few facts that we do know. We have a school nutrition and meal cost study that we conduct on a regular basis, probably not as often as any of us would like. What that does show is that students are wasting a quarter of their calories and nutrients in that program. That at the time of that study, 30% of schools were not meeting sodium target 1, and even with that, we were having that level of waste. 83% of schools were not meeting the whole grain standard, and milk consumption had reduced by almost 10%. And on each of those three issues, I do want to be clear. People talk about rolling back, and that makes the headlines a lot. Congress had provided flexibility on all three of these issues for a number of years in the annual appropriations process. Schools said to us, we need permanency so we can order. They order large quantities of food years out and plan their meals a year out. And this rule simply provided them permanency on those issues, which I do think around the edges on this, as we talked about earlier with Mr. Comer. These school nutrition professionals, I think you would agree, really want to provide these kids nutritious meals, but they want to make sure they're eating the food that they have.
I love that you brought that up, because we have heard in this committee wildly differing statistics on this. And we even had a whole discussion. We had dietitians in here who specialize in crafting good tasting meals for kids that meet all of the requirements before they were rolled back, and they do not report these kinds of levels of waste. They report that the kids are eating the food and enjoying the food. And so we may want to have a further discussion down the line about how to make sure that dietitians are creating these meals and not just for food service organizations that just drop off food and put it in a microwave.
I agree, Dr. Schreier, it's not an easy question. I will say anecdotally, I've gone to schools who have chefs on board who create wonderful meals that I enjoy, and I sit on the table with those kids, and the kids who brought their lunch from home, in one particular instance was peanut butter and crackers and some those fruit chewies, I can't remember what they're called, and they're trading football cards for the food that he brought in his lunch when there's wonderful food on the table. So it's a lot deeper question than just these school meal standards. I do think we want to give some deference to the folks who are serving them and looking them in the eye every day.
And I'm going to just respond to that because I completely understand what you're saying there, but I might take that in a little bit different direction because I have a 10-year-old, so I know what we put in his lunch. I also see what his friends' parents put in their lunches, and they do sound a lot like that. A peanut butter sandwich without the crust and cookies and chips. So
I have that discussion with my 9-year-old every morning.
we don't discuss, we just give. But here's, I guess
It's
my
important to
statement
talk them through why they're eating what they're eating.
That's been well established. But I wanted to talk with you, maybe in the future we could talk about whether we could provide good tasting, chef/dietitian inspired meals that meet these requirements for all students, because they're all going to have future lives, and I would love to create that palette in all of our kids. And frankly, when it comes to a contrast between what school nutrition provides and these, let's open that up for further discussion.
Okay, we'd be happy to engage with you. Thank you.
Thank you. I now recognize the ranking member of the full committee, Dr. Fox from North Carolina, for 5 minutes for your questions.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and Dr. Shire, your child probably appreciates the fact that you prepare the lunch and don't put the child in the school food service. Mr. Lips, thank you for joining us today. In your testimony, you discussed some efforts your office has made to improve integrity in the programs you operate. I appreciate hearing your efforts on this important issue. However, GAO has just completed a new report that notes the high rate of improper payments can suggest programs are inherently vulnerable to fraud. The report goes on to note that USDA has not established a process to assess risk and that existing efforts to assess the risk do not comprehensively consider fraud risk. It seems from the write-up of the agency's oral comments on the report, the agency believes it does not have risk assessments in place. Your testimony notes that you have switched to a risk-based approach. So can you tell us what specifically the agency is doing in this capacity? And when you say, quote, more can be done, end quote, can you discuss how that addresses what the GAO raised?
Chairwoman Fox, thanks for that question. As you know, that report's relatively new, and we haven't had an opportunity to put out our full response on that yet. I do want to clarify one point. The agency believes that it does have a risk assessment in place. It does not have the comprehensive risk assessment in place that GAO recommends for all federal agencies, and we agreed with them that can be beneficial. There is no objection to increasing integrity in any of our programs at FNS, and we work on that every day. So we believe that we have good measures in place, but we're always happy to improve those, and we'll be doing that moving forward. We think the verification proposal that we have in the budget on school meals is an important part of that. We put out an online school meals application that helps improve integrity in school meals, and a verification toolkit that we provide to state agencies and schools to better administer that program as we move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Lips. Representative Bonamici asked you about the proposal to require each individual school to certify that they are eligible to participate in the Community Eligibility Provision, or CEP. Can you discuss how the budget is developed to maximize helping hungry students throughout the year and across programs? Further, can you state again whether that change will result in children's eligible for reduced price or free lunch losing access to the program?
Sure. Chairwoman Fox, the eligibility criteria for this program are set in statute, and this program does not change that. So children who are eligible under the guidelines provided in statute for this program will continue to be eligible. They will not be eligible through CEP, but through the general application process. And I will, as you request, repeat, that proposal is put forward as an opportunity to target free and reduced price meals to those kids in need of free and reduced price meals. And those of us who can afford to pay for our child's own meals, the taxpayer dollars that were previously going for that, y'all can choose to enter into these other programs, such as important things we've been talking about in the summer program.
Thank you. Madam Chairman, I would like to submit this GAO report titled, USDA has reported taking some steps to reduce improper payments, but should comprehensively assess fraud risk, for the record.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I want to say that I eat lunch in every cafeteria I can eat in when I have the opportunity to do so. And I always go into the cafeterias and thank the school food service for the work that they do in helping to prepare good meals for the students. These are generally people who don't make a lot of money, are very devoted to what they do, are very devoted to serving the students, and work hard at complying with the myriad of rules and regulations that we give to them. And I want to pat them on the back every time I am in a school and always do my utmost to try to eat a lunch there to show my support. So thank you for what USDA is doing. We must do better in terms of fraud and abuse so that the truly needy students get the food that they need. Thank you very much, Madam Chairman.
Thank you.
I now recognize Representative Hayes from Connecticut for 5 minutes for your questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Lipp, for being here today. I'm scribbling so many things on this paper because, as usual, I hear many racist, wrong, and uninformed comments about what this looks like on the ground. Children don't choose to be recipients of school lunch programs, free school lunch programs. Some other things that I've heard that I want to address really quickly: community eligibility, talking about wading through regulations, all this conversation surrounding meals that kids like or don't like, the administrative costs, the paperwork. School nutrition professionals don't want to serve kids meals they don't like. They have to look into the faces of kids as they're giving them meals that they don't like. I can tell you what school personnel don't like. Over here. I can tell you what school personnel don't like, having been a teacher for 15 years. It's hungry children. Hungry kids don't learn.
I agree with that.
So it's not about, this isn't this idea of the regulation, the paperwork, or what kids choose or like. Kids come to school hungry. They like to eat. They like to be fed. So I want you to just consider that as you move forward. It's not
Congresswoman,
just,
I'll say that I
wasn't a
have
question.
been to
That
schools
wasn't
and
a
sit down
question.
with those kids and
That
watch
wasn't a
them not eat
question. I'm
those
reclaiming
meals,
my time, Madam
and
Chair.
That deeply
That wasn't a
bothers me.
question. I have 5 minutes, and I have several questions I want to get through.
you.
I was just making a statement. So when we talk about the economic impact, last week your department's own economic research services published a comprehensive study concluding that when families redeem nutrition assistance or SNAP benefits, local retailers are supported and job growth is boosted. The study found that for every $10,000 of additional SNAP spending, employment in non-metro areas increased by nearly 0.5%. This research gives confirmation from your department of what multiple independent, high-quality studies show, that SNAP benefits support and create jobs in our economy. Therefore, how can you justify the administration's attempt to cut SNAP when these proposals would not only take away food, but also reduce employment?
Congresswoman, I do want to address your previous accusations.
I don't have time. I'm
I
so
will tell
sorry,
you
but
that
I don't
do
have
not
time
like
for you to-
sitting down at a table with kids who are hungry and watching them not
With
eat
all
the
due
food before
respect,
them.
Deputy Secretary Lips, I don't have time. I only have 5 minutes, and I would like, these are the questions that I'd like an answer to.
Well, I just wanted to clarify the point that I don't like to watch hungry kids not eat their meals. With regard to your question, there is no doubt that when tax dollars are infused into a local economy, that it helps local businesses. The question in these programs is, are we feeding people? Are we helping hungry people eat? And that's the measure that we have. There are a lot of ways to infuse money in local economies, and y'all make those decisions every day in your policy making. My job is to focus on helping ensure that hungry people have access to food, and if that helps benefit a local economy, we're glad to have that as a side benefit.
Thank you. Mr. Lip, do you know how many families will be affected by this proposed $1.7 billion cut to the SNAP program?
Which cut are you talking about, Congresswoman?
That was in the President's fiscal year 2020 budget, the cuts to the SNAP program.
Are you talking about the ABOD proposal?
Cuts to nutrition programs overall.
Cuts to nutrition program in general. There are different numbers on different proposals. I'm not sure which one specifically you're addressing.
All of them?
Well, we have some proposals that don't reduce program participation at all. They provide benefits in different ways.
800,000 people will be
that's the number
affected by
referring
the cuts to these programs.
just to the ABOD rule for people who do not participate
800,000.
in an education activity.
In your opening, you said great customer service starts with listening to customers, to understanding their requirements, their challenges, and the choices available to address them within the existing program authorities. Can I ask you, were any of your, I'm moving to a different topic, were any of your WIC staff consulted at FNS headquarters when you had the decision to realign the regions?
Absolutely.
They were? Because this committee learned that in a recent call with the committee staff acknowledged that one of the problems this proposal has presented is around WIC funding that flows through FNS regions. On the call, your staff indicated that no action would be taken on the realignment before the WIC funding issue had been addressed. However, at the time of the call, the USDA had already announced the realignment with the impacted states and tribes. So is there communication between your staff and the policies that are coming out of your administration?
Congresswoman, I'd be happy to talk to you about that at length. The facts that you have are not accurate. We are in a phase of meeting with all of our customers at this time because customer service is at the top of the list. My regional administrator colleagues are currently out meeting with all of our operators who run this program. And after the two regional administrators who are exchanging meet, their staff at lower levels are meeting to ensure that everyone's concerns are offered. And I want to be clear that this was not a proposal that I brought forward. It's a proposal that staff worked out to ensure we have regions with 9 state agencies and 39 tribal organizations and regions with 5 state agencies and 20 ITOs. They cannot equally serve their constituents in that way. So our regional staff brought this proposal to me and said, let us balance this workload so we can better serve our customers. It's a great idea. There are some issues that need to be worked out, and we will get them all worked out before we move forward. That's how we operate at FNS. Thank you.
Thank you. I now recognize Representative Thompson from Pennsylvania for 5 minutes for your questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Secretary Lips, thank you for your service. Thank you for your work in this area. Thank you for your work of doing our best to provide poor, hungry families with ultimate food security. And ultimate food security comes through a job. And the more than 7 million jobs are open and available throughout this great country today. And we do have a skills gap. We know that. We've worked hard in this committee to address that skills gap. And quite frankly, within the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, I appreciate your work and the work of Secretary Perdue to help those folks who are able-bodied, which is a definition that comes with broad exemptions for small kids and different things, age ranges, very definitive exclusions, but people who are able-bodied to be able to get access to get that training that leads to food security. A SNAP program, to defend SNAP, I mean, it provides, as someone who chaired the Nutrition Committee and the Agriculture Committee for 2 years, we know what that provides is very important, but it's very limited. And if you want ultimate food security, it really comes through the effort and the work that you all are doing. And I don't appreciate when my colleagues extract certain statistics and try to demonize, what is the right thing to do to help people and to do things for. You're not doing things to people, but you're doing things for people. My question, though, is not on the SNAP program. It is I want to thank you for the department's work on last year's rulemaking to reinstate the 1% flavored milk as an option in our schools. That certainly will be a helpful move to increase milk consumption in our schools. I've seen that already as I've visited schools and been able to enjoy a school lunch with a table full of kids. I don't know if they enjoyed me there as much as I enjoyed being there, but and to enjoy having 1% chocolate milk, actually. I know the kids appreciate that, with the goal of not losing another generation of milk drinkers. But I'm hopeful we'll be able to move further. The next step is to allow our schools the option to serve whole milk. We're talking a difference between 1% milk fat and 3.5% milk fat. And on all the science and the data, and we do have unfortunately, some associations have not kept up with I don't think, with science. But the difference there in the nutritional value, the health values are just significant. We know so much more than the bad decision was made in 2010 to demonize milk fat. So the next step really is to allow schools the option to serve up the option. We're not dictating to serve whole milk, as my legislation HR 832 does. Would you be in favor of giving schools the flexibility to offer these varieties as well?
Congressman, first let me thank you for your previous comments. I think you know that our intentions are good with regard to our SNAP policies, and I appreciate your comments on that front. With regard to your question on whole milk, we would like to engage with you on that front. I understand that most Americans are buying whole or 2% milk at the grocery store. And as I stated earlier, what we do know from our school nutrition and milk house study is that milk consumption has decreased 10% over those years. And when you talk about the nutrients that are provided in that milk as part of this meal pattern, if kids aren't drinking that, that's a problem, right? There's a problem on both ends, and we have to recognize that. So we want the meal pattern to be based on science. The dietary guidelines advisory committee is looking at some of these questions now, and we think they're important questions that you raise, and we would love to engage with you on that.
Have the studies identified what the alternative beverages are? I was in a dairy roundtable yesterday at my state capitol in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and there was a school dietitian there, and she reported to me, she gave me a specific brand, I won't name that, but it was a high sugar, high caffeine is her observations of what is being consumed by these kids. That's what they're opting to do. They haven't had a great milk experience for the most part since 2010, when there was legislation, when the last time school nutrition standards were passed. It was a bill I voted against, by the way. And so I don't know if we're identifying what are the alternative beverages that are being utilized with you said at least a 10% decrease in milk consumption. They're drinking something.
Right. Well, I can assure you, Congressman, that they're not purchasing those high sugar, high caffeine beverages in schools. Per our regulations, but there is no doubt that kids are bringing those
not even out of
home.
vending machines?
They're buying them outside. No, sir, they're not allowed as part of the competitive foods. But the unfortunate situation is that all of these children don't have the benefit of having parents with the ability to train them at a young age, like Dr. Schreier. And so we have to work together to do the best we can for all of America's children.
All right, thank you, Secretary.
Thank you. I now recognize Representative Lee from Nevada for 5 minutes for your questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Secretary Lips.
Good morning.
Before coming to Congress, I had the opportunity to work with children in Nevada's K-12 system through many nonprofit organizations, including many students whose primary meal actually came from school. I represent Clark County, Nevada, the 5th largest school district in the country, where almost 2 out of 3 children qualify for free and reduced lunch. So I certainly appreciate how important it is that the calories our children consume pack as much nutritional punch as possible. And one of my primary concerns is the threshold or amount of certain ingredients being served in school breakfasts and lunches. For instance, added sugars contribute no essential nutrients, are often hidden in juices, breads, snacks that schools serve to students. Many children rely on these meals as their primary source of nutrition, and it's our responsibility that they're getting the nutrition they need during their most vulnerable years to set them up for a healthy and successful life. Sugar consumption is a major cause of obesity and many chronic diseases, such as diabetes. Current research demonstrates that childhood obesity has reached epidemic proportions in the last 2 decades. The proportion of overweight teens has tripled. We've also classified obesity as a national epidemic, and schools were identified as one of the key settings for public health strategy to address this concern. So I understand the need for providers to want to feed kids the food they prefer, but when we're faced with a national epidemic, it's incumbent upon us to set standards that actually address that epidemic. And in December of 2018, FNS issued a final rule rolling back the previously established nutrition standards for school meals on whole grains, sodium, and milk. And as part of rolling back these standards, FNS is now allowing schools to serve milk with unlimited added sugar and calories, which does not align with dietary guidelines for Americans' recommendation to limited added sugars to 10% of daily calories. Mr. Lips, as you know, provisions of the rule around whole grains and sodium are now the subject of a lawsuit against the department because they are not in compliance with the law's requirement that school nutrition standards align with the current edition of the Dietary Guidelines for Americans. Why did FNS issue a final rule that violates this law?
Congresswoman, I can't comment on active litigation, but I'd be happy to respond to your question. First of all, with regard to the comment that you'll read a lot about us rolling back standards, Congress has provided annual changes on this front with regard to sodium, whole grains, and dairy in the annual appropriations process for a number of years. One of the requests for schools early on was for us to provide them stability on the front that Congress had been providing, and that is what this rule did. The school nutrition and meal cost study showed that a quarter of the nutrients provided in school meals are wasted every day. When you look at things like milk, that's a problem if kids are not having those nutrients. So I wouldn't say, as you stated, that we wanted meals kids prefer. Certainly we do. We want them to have nutritious meals that they will eat to ensure that they're getting that nutrition, particularly for kids who may be going home to an empty cupboard. I understand some may choose not to eat their school lunch because they don't like it and they'll go home and eat whatever they want. Not all of the kids have that option. 30% of schools were not meeting the sodium target, and 83% were not meeting the whole grain target. Milk consumption is reduced by 10%, and this is still with a quarter of the nutrients in the program being wasted. So these flexibilities that were provided, which Congress had provided through Annual Appropriations Act, give stabilities to the school on that front with regard to minimal flexibilities to help produce meals that their kids will eat.
I understand that. I think there's a clear balance. I mean, reducing.
We agree.
But I believe that as regulators, that establishing standards that set children up for a lifetime of health is incredibly important. I'd like you to answer this next question with a yes or no answer. Is the department currently considering any other proposed regulatory changes to nutrition standards for school meals?
Congresswoman, we have a regulation with regard to school meals in our recently released regulatory agenda. What's going to be included in that, we don't know at this time, and I can't comment on that until the proposed rule comes out.
Okay. Well, I just hope that whatever FNS is considering at this time will be in compliance with law and evidence-based, so it's in the best interest of our school children. I want to close by stating in 2018, my home state of Nevada, approximately 136,000 students participated in school breakfast and 227,000 in the school lunch program. So when we think about food insecurity at large and hungry students who depend on these critical programs, we need to think about how they align with nutrition standards. Just giving kids food that they like to eat is, we need to also be thinking about setting them up.
Time has expired.
Thank you.
We agree.
I now recognize Representative Johnson from South Dakota for 5 minutes for your questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Lips, I think an unfortunate trend in this country in recent decades is we're just getting further and further away from the farm and the ranch. So we have less of an understanding, maybe more of a tenuous understanding of how food goes from the farm to the table. That's why I've always liked the Farm to School program. I think it teaches children, that uses, of course, locally sourced fruits and vegetables and other foods to help students understand the local economy, the local culture. It won't surprise you that I know South Dakota is a beef and bison powerhouse, and I think South Dakota students could benefit from a deeper understanding of the value of that beef and bison. And so I think my first question is, do you agree that this Farm to School program could better prioritize locally sourced beef and bison?
Congressman, we do think it's important. Let me comment on the Farm to School program in general. I have seen out on the ground the effect that program has on children with regard to making healthy decisions. When kids are connected to their food, they do make healthy decisions. I think it's one of the best programs that's moving kids' nutrition standards forward as we look at that. Certainly, I agree with your contention on beef in that program. We want kids to have local connection to all of their food.
Well, I'm glad we're on the same page today. I'm introducing the Farm and Ranch to School bill, which would allow for a greater portion of that budget to be used on locally sourced beef, bison, and other meats. I think that would be really good moving forward. What I want to do is shift now, though, to conversation about SNAP and ABODs, and I'm going to lay out 3 things that I believe, and I want you to listen and see where maybe you might disagree with me. First off, we should be clear that it's the law of the land, in my understanding, since the 1996 Welfare Act, that able-bodied SNAP recipients should work. That's the law of the land. My understanding is that your proposed ABOD rule doesn't change that, but rather attempts to close a loophole to better align USDA rules with congressional intent. That's my first understanding. My second understanding is just that I know I'm not lazy. I know I grew up as a poor boy in South Dakota. I know my life is better because I was held accountable by parents, by teachers, by the laws and regulations and rules of a society. And I don't think that holding people accountable is punishment. I think it's a hallmark of a responsible society. That's my second understanding. My third understanding flows from the fact that it has been alleged today at this hearing that USDA is working to punish people, these able-bodied SNAP recipients, because you want able-bodied people to work. And so I would just say this. I do not think that holding people accountable is punishment. And I do not think that work is punishment. I think that work is opportunity. And I think holding people accountable through the value of work is one way that we can improve people's lives in a fundamentally critical way. Those are the 3 things that I understand to be true, Mr. Lips. In what ways am I in error?
Congressman, I agree with you on each of those points. I'll talk about each of them specifically. Congress put the work requirement in the law in 96, you're correct, and it says, if you look at the statute, it says work requirement across the top. It's not unclear about what it is when Congress put it in. This agency is trying to ensure that those individuals who are defined in statute, who Congress said should be subject to work requirement, are engaged. The law, our regulations provide that those individuals to whom this applies have an opportunity to engage in education towards a job through skills training. We are working to ensure that that happens. The states are obligated to know who these people are. I can show you in our regulations and in our memorandums how states are to bring these people in, assess their needs, their skills, their skill gaps, and help them to work on those. I visited with a young lady on one of my trips who was subject to one of these work requirements. She got a letter in the mail and said, you know what, I decided maybe I could change my life because I could get some new skills to get a job, and now she's employed. The things that you're saying are true. I believe that I have succeeded in my career to date because my parents set expectations for me, and I met them. I understand that I didn't have all the difficulties that some of the individuals that are subject to this work requirement have, and we are working to help them have the skills that they need to deal with those each and every day.
Well, Mr. Lips, I want to thank Secretary Perdue for the proposed rule, because I think work is opportunity, and I appreciate USDA's interest in moving your rules closer to congressional intent. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I yield back.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. I now recognize Representative Trone from Maryland for 5 minutes for your questions.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Secretary Lips. I'd also like to recognize for Shadow Day here another youth participant over to my left, Michael Morris. Say hello. Thank you, Michael. Mr. Lips, I spent 15 years growing up on a farm. I understand rural America, and my district is very rural. There's actually deeper struggles with hunger in rural areas. But across the country, only 1 in 7 children, 1 in 7, that had a free reduced meal during the school year is taking advantage of that during the summer nutrition program. So I don't doubt your intentions at all. What I doubt is your execution ability to fill that gap, because these kids are hungry. School year, summer, they're still hungry, and our job is to feed these kids. So what are the top 2 things, quickly, that your agency is doing to fix this gap and execute better? 1 in 7.
Congressman, the top two things are continuing to ensure that people have the resources necessary to expand our summer food service program and continuing to find new and effective ways to expand the summer EBT demonstration projects so we can ensure that you have the information you need to provide us the resources to feed more children in the summer.
But that's been basically the process for the entire time we've had this focus, and we're not making any progress. So there's an old rule, if you keep doing the same thing, you get the same answer. I mean, we need to do some marketing to communicate and execute better to help these kids. They're hungry.
Congressman, having grown up in a rural area, I agree with your earlier comments on that. The summer food service program through a congregate feeding requirement is not going to serve all of those children. The money provided to this agency through the annual appropriations process for summer EBT is very limited. We've had great success on some of those fronts. We're looking at new opportunities to expand that to provide you more information. But the reality is that we need to work together on opportunities in child nutrition reauthorization to give the agency more resources to help states and local sponsors feed more children.
Okay, we got to move past the good intentions. September 2018, Department of Homeland Security published a proposed rule expanding the definition of public charge. The rule makes it possible for folks to be disqualified from obtaining a green card or entering the country simply because they sought health care or they sought food assistance for their family. Food Nutrition Services' stated goal is to end hunger, following the guidelines. DHS obviously does not share that goal. What is your agency doing to push back against rules like this from DHS?
Congressman, I believe that rule is still open as a proposed, and so I'm not going to comment on that specifically. I will say that our agency provides comments on those type of rules to inform the process going forward. We've met with a number of stakeholders on that front and encouraged them to meet with our colleagues over at DHS to talk about that front. Another important thing is I think we all need to be clear when we talk about what this rule does, that we don't talk about what it does not do. With regard to its effect on a number of our programs who are not touched in the proposed rule, and we want to ensure that there's clear information to the recipients of our programs who you have provided in statute can access these programs despite that rule.
I think that's all nice but irrelevant. You know, what guidance did you provide DHS about this rule in the interagency review process that it's clearly not feeding kids that need to be fed?
Congressman, again, this rule doesn't affect our child nutrition programs. I will say that. With regard to the rule, we did provide comment, but again, that rule is still in the open proposed phase.
It affects their ability to get a green card or get food assistance.
It does not with regard to child nutrition programs for which the statute provides.
I just want to reiterate, your agency's mission is to work to end this hunger.
We agree with that.
Through your programs. And I don't know how you can justify not pushing back against rules from other agencies that would choke your ability to pursue the agency's mission. The rule is shameful, and if you're not pushing back, that's doubly shameful, and it's an abdication of your duties. So we need your help. The kids need your help. They're hungry, and they're not getting fed.
I understand, Congressman, and again, I want to say that rule does not affect our child nutrition programs as proposed.
Yield back.
Thank you. I now recognize the chairman of the full committee, Representative Chairman Scott from Virginia, for 5 minutes for your questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, I want to recognize one of the persons following us today, Jessica Reese from Mississippi. Thank you. Mr. Lips, the chair of the subcommittee asked you about the community eligibility. And did I understand that you mentioned there'd be savings with the change that you're making?
Yes, sir.
And are those savings generated by fewer children having access to free school meals?
It's generated by children who do not qualify for free and reduced price meals, not getting free meals at school.
Does it also include those who are eligible that can't get through the paperwork for one reason or another?
Those children can still qualify to get through the normal application process.
If they don't, one of the things about this community eligibility is everybody's eligible. You don't have to fill out the paperwork.
Right.
Many eligible students do not get access because they don't fill out the paperwork for one reason or another. In terms of I understand the administration is changing the way you calculate the poverty rate.
I think there's a proposal out on that front, sir.
And I understand that since 2000, the change CPI has increased would have increased the poverty rate by 39.7%, but the regular CPI would be 45.7, an increase of 6 percentage points. Does that sound about right?
I will leave the statisticians to that, Congressman.
But there's a difference.
There is a difference, yes, sir.
Okay. The able-bodied adults without dependents, when they are disqualified, does that affect children?
No, sir.
Say again?
It does not affect children. By statutory definition, it does not apply to an individual that has a
So
child in the home.
if a non-custodial parent loses food stamps and is less able to pay child support, does that affect the children?
They will continue to qualify for food stamp benefits if they did before.
But the non-custodial parent would be less able to pay food stamps. In terms of WIC, do you agree with the studies that show participation in the WIC program is associated with reduced rates of infant mortality and improved nutritional status for pregnant women and postpartum women?
Yes, sir, we have very positive studies on that front in WIC.
And maternal mortality is more than double, and our infant mortality rate is one of the worst amongst international nations. Is that right?
Yes, sir, I've heard that statistic.
And so what does WIC do to improve that situation?
I think the studies show that being a part of WIC itself helps with those situations. WIC doesn't specifically provide services on that front, but we certainly provide a rounded service through the WIC program to ensure that people have access to everything that pregnant women, mothers, and children have access to all the services that they may need through referrals.
Now, what does WIC provide other than food?
WIC provides a number of services through breastfeeding peer counseling. They provide referrals for support. There is some testing that's done. We want to make sure that mothers and children have everything they need to exceed nutritionally in life at that point.
And you have studies that show that makes a difference?
Yes, sir, we do.
In September 2018, the Department of Homeland Security published a rule expanding the definition of public charge. Makes it possible for people to be disqualified for many services. Your stated goal for the Food and Nutrition Service is to work to end hunger through administration of federal nutrition assistance programs for vulnerable populations. The Homeland Security's own analysis of their rule said that the rule, if implemented, could lead to worse health outcomes, including increased prevalence of obesity, malnutrition, especially for pregnant or breastfeeding women, infants, or children, increased use of emergency rooms, increases in uncompensated care, and reduced productivity and educational attainment. Do you agree with that assessment, and what did your agency respond when asked to comment on this proposed rule?
Chairman, as I stated to your colleague earlier, that rule is still being assessed in proposed form, so I won't comment on that specifically, but we did provide comments on the effect on our programs of that proposed rule.
Do you have evidence to show that your changes in sodium in the school lunch program is evidence-based?
Yes, sir. The school nutrition and meal cost study shows that 30% of the schools weren't meeting that sodium standard, 83% weren't meeting the whole grain standard, and even with that, 1/4 of the nutrients provided to that program were being wasted for failure of kids to consume.
Is that because the food was not tasty or because of the standards? We've had evidence in other hearings that if you provide tasty food, it is not wasted. If you provide untasty food, it will be wasted.
We agree with that, and the school nutrition professionals tell us that these flexibility will help them to provide food that won't be wasted.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I now recognize Representative Sablan from the Northern Mariana Islands for 5 minutes for your questions.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, for holding today's hearing and for allowing me to sit on the dais. Good morning and welcome, Secretary Lips. I don't have 5 minutes. I have a lot of questions, but let me ask some and just ask for you to respond. I want to know about the continued omission of the Northern Marianas from the department's research on school meal costs. We face unique challenges in implementing child nutrition programs as our providers face very high food costs. As the Northern Marianas is not included in research like the school nutrition and meal cost study, how does the department ensure that we are receiving fair and sufficient federal reimbursements to operate the programs?
Congressman Sablon, I believe that CNMI is on a block grant with regard to school nutrition programs, which makes that operation a little bit different. I'd be happy to engage with you on any questions that you have on that front to help better the operation of that program.
Right, but if you don't have the research, the data to show, then I don't know how you come to arrive at how much that block grant will be.
I believe Congress provides that formula to us, but again, we'll be happy to discuss that with you.
Okay, I want to ask about the school meal reimbursement rates for the non-contiguous Pacific areas, Alaska, Hawaii, American Samoa, Guam, and the Northern Marianas. What is the basis used to establish those rates? Does the department think that the historical basis remain valid today? And how frequently are the rates recomputed to keep up with changing prices and market conditions?
Congressman, I apologize. I don't know offhand how often we recalculate those and what studies they're based off of, but we'll be happy to get that back to you quickly.
I appreciate that. And I want to know the status of an information request regarding whether data collected in the upcoming School Nutrition and Meal Cost Study, Part 2, will be used to determine reimbursement rates for all outlying areas, including the Northern Marianas, even though it will not be one of the data collection sites. On April 18, the committee staff asked your office for this information, but have not yet received an answer. Are you able to answer that question for me today?
I do not have an answer to that. If you've not received an answer from our office yet, you will have that tomorrow.
Tomorrow?
Tomorrow.
I appreciate
we will get you an answer tomorrow. I'm not aware that we received that, but you should have received an answer by now, and we will assure you will get one soon.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And in my remaining time, I was able to, it was a teacher actually who made me understand the connection between students' school lunch and food at home under SNAP. So I want to ask the administration's plan for the nutritional assistance program in the Mariana Islands. We're not in SNAP, as you know. We get a $12 million block grant that has not changed since 2009. I did put an extra $30 million into the 2014 Farm Bill for the Marianas program. That money raised benefits to be comparable to Guam, which has similar food costs. We have also included more households using income eligibilities that are closer to SNAP. But this progress can slip away. In fact, the Marianas program is planning to start cutting benefits and taking families out of the system beginning October 1st. Now, I just did get another $25 million in this disaster supplemental yesterday, and we're hoping to get some update from the Marianas and from your Western Regional Office about how the current economic downturn will change demands on the system. But what I want to know is whether the administration thinks we should continue this way with a system that always needs special attention, a kind of Rube Goldberg contraption. Would it not be smarter and more administratively efficient to just put the Marianas into SNAP?
Congressman, we would be happy to continue to engage with you on that matter. I know that FNS has over time. There are a lot of requirements that come with being SNAP operators.
We have met those requirements, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Secretary. We're now eligibility. We're done with the eligibility system requirement. EBT is coming online, and the governor has said he can meet half the administrative costs. You have the statutory authority to do it. You do not have to wait for Congress. So why not just incorporate the Northern Marianas into SNAP? Would that not be easier all around?
Congressman, I don't know if it would be easier. I'm not sure that you or I would agree that that's the right question. But I do think both of us can continue to work together to make sure that we're serving the people of CNMI in the best way that we can.
Mr. Secretary, I've been trying to get there since 2009. What is it now, 2019?
2019.
Yeah, 10 years. So I'm working together. Can we work a little faster, maybe, please?
I'd be happy to meet with you as often as you would prefer, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. And Madam Chair, I yield my time back.
Thank you. I now recognize Representative Grothman from Wisconsin for 5 minutes for your questions.
Thanks. A couple questions. And first of all, maybe we've already gone over some of these. I was in another hearing. The percentage of students who are getting free or reduced lunch, say in the most recent year available compared to, say, 10 years ago. Do you have information on that?
I know that number. I do have that number handy if you can hold. The percent getting free and reduced in 2011 was 66%, and now that's 74% as of 2018.
74% of what?
Of the students participating in school lunch program are free and reduced
Okay.
meals.
Maybe that's misleading. Is that the same thing as total students, or could you distinguish that between, I can't believe that 74% of the American students are eligible
Sorry,
for free.
the percent so the school lunch program has participation from those that receive free meals, from those that receive reduced price meals, and from those who have paid meals.
Okay.
The percent that are getting free and reduced out of all of those is 74%, but that's out of all participants. If you're asking the number of students that participate in the program, I don't know what percentage that is out of all American school children.
Okay. It kind of makes that number not particularly relevant then. Do you know just raw numbers, the number of kids participating 10 years ago compared to today?
I don't have the numbers, sir. Actually, I do. We had 31 million, almost 32 million participating in 2011, and we're now down to around 30 million in 2018.
So even though the percentage, what do you attribute that? So the percentage of people in a school lunch program getting free and reduced is going up, but the overall number is dropping. I mean, that seems counterintuitive. How do you
We believe the major increase in the free and reduced price categories is through the community eligibility provision that there's been a lot of discussion about this morning. The reduction in those who are paying for their meals, either in full or partial, is our school nutrition professionals tell us is their ability to provide meals that are both nutritious and kids will eat after the Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act has reduced and those kids have chosen to bring their meal or to eat off campus.
Well, this would indicate that more people are eating that, bringing their own food, or right?
Yes, sir.
Over time. So and to what do you attribute that?
Many of the school nutrition professionals tell us that without these flexibilities that the Secretary provided in his recent rule, that they weren't able to provide lunches that were both nutritious and the kids would enjoy eating.
So during the last 10 years, for whatever reason, schools were being forced by the federal government to provide meals that nobody would want, or at least many people would not want to eat.
Yes, sir. Many of the schools have struggled with that.
Okay. Could you give us just a general percentage of school kids who are obese, say, today compared to 30 or 40 years ago?
I don't have a particular number on that with regard to school kids, Congressman, but certainly the numbers show that obesity has increased significantly in recent years.
Okay. And kind of in line with the first thing we said, you hear anecdotally when you talk to students that a lot of people throw away this food. Is there any hard evidence on that, or just have anecdotal evidence?
Yes, sir. The school nutrition and meal cost study shows that a quarter of the nutrients provided to kids and elementary kids in school meals is wasted every day. We see that as a problem, particularly with kids who have to go home to empty cupboards. We want to make sure that that the local school nutrition professionals serving them have the minimal flexibility necessary to ensure they want to eat the food that's served to them and that it's also nutritious.
I'm sorry, miss, what percent of food is being thrown away?
A quarter of the nutrients provided to elementary students is wasted every day.
Do you believe that? I'll believe that 25% is thrown away. I question that people are throwing away 25% of their food and then aren't being given any food to eat at home. Is that believable?
Say that again. I think that the type of food that some of these children are eating at home may not be nutritious, and I do think some of them are going home to empty cupboards. I've sat with kids and watched them trade food with kids who bring their lunch but not choose to eat the type of things that are served to them at lunch.
Okay. Well, it's something that we wanted to do several years ago on this committee. So you are trying to take steps to improve this program, which is kind of, if they're throwing away 25% of their food, would have to have been described as a failure until a new administration. Is that accurate?
The nutrition standards in school meals have made great progress in ensuring that kids are eating more nutritious foods, and the program has done great work in that way. The school nutrition professionals tell us on the ground that there are some minimal flexibilities that they need to ensure that they can serve kids the foods they need, and we're working to make sure that happens every day.
Well, thank you. The more flexibility, the better.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Before I recognize Representative Wild, I want to ask unanimous consent to enter into the record the USDA's School Nutrition and Meal Cost Study, published in April of 2019. The study looked at all aspects of school nutrition programs before and after implementation of the updated nutrition standards under the Healthy, Hunger-Free Kids Act, in comparing data from school year 2009-10 before implementation of the new standards to school year 2014-15. The study found that overall nutritional quality of school meals increased by over 40%, while plate waste did not increase. Healthier food was not associated with increased costs, and students and parents were satisfied with the meals. I want to congratulate our school nutrition professionals who helped make that happen, but also note that the report found that there were higher rates of participation in schools with lunches of higher nutritional value, without objection. And I recognize Representative Wild from Pennsylvania for 5 minutes for your questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Mr. Lips.
Good morning.
In the audience today is a 20-year-old young lady named Lindy, who is a product of the foster care system. And in the brief time I have spent with her today, I've learned of the many struggles she has endured in her short life. And the last thing she or any foster child needs is to worry about whether they will get lunch at school. In 2013, the USDA issued a policy memo clarifying its interpretation of the statutory provision in the Healthy, Hunger-Free Kids Act that provided categorical eligibility for free school meals to foster children. The policy memo reversed the department's previous interpretation of the statute and narrowed it to include only those foster children who are currently the responsibility of the state. Recently, as the number of foster children and children in kinship care has grown, and kinship care, of course, is children who are in the placement of a relative, there has been a growing number of children who have been placed with a friend or relative and therefore are not deemed to be the responsibility of the state. As a result, they are not considered to be categorically eligible for free school meals under the department's interpretation of the law. So my question to you is, do you believe that the USDA should extend categorical eligibility to this group of children once again?
Congresswoman, it's an important issue. That decision obviously took place before my arrival at the agency, and I only recently became aware of it. We have some more research to do on that point, and we'll get back to you. It's certainly an important issue that we want to engage with you on, ensuring that those children that you're referring to have access to nutritious meals.
Then you are probably aware that in a letter to Chairman Scott on April 2nd of this year regarding this issue, Secretary Perdue wrote, and I quote, "The agency is currently examining the applicability of guardianship arrangements to the existing authority." Are you familiar with that letter?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you provide us with an update on that review or that examination, including a timeline of when you expect it to be completed?
I don't have an update at this time, Congresswoman, but we will keep you advised as well and continue to engage with you on that.
Can we get some kind of more specific timeline that you expect that this very important issue for children who may be hungry at school, notwithstanding the fact that they are under the care of a relative, when this issue might be addressed?
We will contact you this afternoon with a date on which we will get you more information on.
All right. My office is at 1607 Longworth. We will look forward to hearing from you. And my legislative director is directly behind you. Dorcas, could you raise your hand? She would be happy to take that information from you. If the USDA's examination shows that you do not have the statutory authority to extend categorical eligibility to children who have been placed in these guardianship arrangements, then Congress will need to pass legislation to provide the statutory authority that the USDA needs to do so. I hope at that point that you will work to promulgate the congressional intent. Thank you.
We're always happy to do so.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I remind my colleagues that pursuant to committee practice, materials for submission for the hearing record must be submitted to the committee clerk within 14 days following the last day of the hearing, preferably in Microsoft Word format. The material submitted must address the subject matter of the hearing. Only a member of the committee or an invited witness may submit materials for inclusion in the hearing record. Documents are limited to 50 pages each. Documents longer than 50 pages will be incorporated into the record via an internet link that you must provide to the committee clerk within the retired time frame. Please recognize that years from now, that link may no longer work. I want to thank the witness for his participation today. What we have heard is very valuable. Members of the committee may have additional questions for you, and we ask the witness to please respond to those questions in writing. The hearing record will be held open for 14 days to receive those responses. And I remind my colleagues that pursuant to committee practice, witness questions for the hearing record must be submitted to the majority committee staff or committee clerk within 7 days. The questions submitted must address the subject matter of the hearing. And I now recognize the distinguished ranking member for his closing statement.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I want to thank you again, Mr. Undersecretary, for being here today. I think it's important to hear how the administration is implementing these programs, and I appreciate the chairwoman for calling this hearing. We discussed a lot of important topics today. One was the need to maintain the flexibility just made permanent by the USDA. If we want kids to benefit from the child nutrition programs, the meals have to be something they will eat. I believe the new rule will allow schools to plan ahead and serve meals that kids will want to eat. Students will also have access to milk they will want to drink, something that is critical for their growth and development. It's alarming to read a report that says almost 30% of the milk served was discarded. And I'm glad to see that Secretary Perdue is trying to help remedy that. I'm sure there is more we can do, but this is a good step. We also discussed the need to continue working on program integrity. I believe USDA is doing some good work here, but it is important to continue those efforts and work to maximize every taxpayer dollar allocated for these programs to be used to actually serve children. I hope the majority is interested in moving a bipartisan child nutrition bill, one that will help improve how these programs work to reach children and one that is fiscally responsible. Those two things are not mutually exclusive, and I believe if we both come to the table recognizing the need for these principles to be achieved, we could send the Senate a great bill. One that helps address the hunger needs in America's youth, one that helps programs like the summer program reach more kids, and one that helps schools reach more students by serving food that doesn't cost more than they take in and provides food kids will actually eat. I look forward to discussions on this issue with the chairwoman and Chairman Scott. I also feel it's necessary to correct some information for the record on the SNAP rule we discussed today. This issue is actually in the Agriculture Committee's jurisdiction, of which I am a member. I can tell you the proposed able-bodied adult without dependents rule amends the regulatory standards by which USDA evaluates state SNAP agency requests to waive the time limit and to end the unlimited carryover of percentage exemptions. The proposed rule would encourage broader application of the statutory work requirement consistent with both the bipartisan welfare reforms of 1996 and the administration's focus on fostering self-sufficiency. Simply put, this proposal does not eliminate waivers. Rather, it expects states to provide legitimate support for such requests. Despite a booming economy, millions of able-bodied adults are excluded from the labor market because of state gimmicks. We also exclude these adults from education and volunteer opportunities because states find it easier to ignore this population than invest in them. More than 1,200 jurisdictions across the country have no expectation of employment for SNAP recipients. And this rule takes necessary steps to move individuals from welfare to work. Further, any adult with a dependent in the household is exempt. It does not matter if the dependent is placed there officially or unofficially. If the adult in question reports a dependent in the household, the rule does not apply. In fact, the Food and Nutrition Act exempts any adult with a dependent in the household, and this rule does not change a thing related to that. Mr. Lips, thank you again for coming today. I appreciate the opportunity to discuss these important issues with you, and I yield back.
Thank you. I now recognize myself.
Madam Chairman.
Yes, I recognize.
I'd like to submit for the record an article from the Washington Times related to the blessings of work and correcting any attitude that work is a punishment.
Without objection.
Thank you.
Now recognize myself for the purpose of making my closing statement. I want to start by welcoming again the foster youth who are here with us today. I'm sure they benefited from listening to our conversation. I also want to thank Representative Johnson for bringing up the Farm to School program, which I know has support on both sides of the aisle. When I just had lunch with students in Oregon, they were happily eating roasted broccoli and asparagus from a local farm, only instead of asking for bison, they were asking for sushi. So Mr. Lips, thank you again for being with us to examine the policies and priorities of the USDA's Food and Nutrition Service. As we discussed today, evidence-based nutrition assistance programs run by the FNS have long served as our country's most effective programs for making sure that every child has access to the healthy food needed to grow and succeed. And importantly, this hearing has illuminated several ways in which FNS, under this administration, is not meeting its commitment to hungry children across the country. Rolling back nutrition standards and undermining programs that help needy families to put food on the table are contrary to the FNS mission to increase food security and reduce hunger. For the federal government to fulfill its responsibility to set the future of our country on a path to success, FNS must recommit to providing basic nutrition assistance to those who need it most. And Congress must do its part to restore bipartisan support for vital nutrition programs that tens of millions of children across the country rely on every single day. Mr. Lips, I do look forward to continuing our work together along with my colleagues here on the subcommittee and the committee to strengthen child nutrition programs and protect the progress we've made toward providing children with nutritious foods that both fuel their health and their development. The future of our country depends on it. I want to again thank everyone for taking time to join us today. Being no further business, the subcommittee stands adjourned.